It's September 10th, 1813, Lake Erie, United States. The fog is so thick you can't see 50 yards. Somewhere out there, 10 British warships are waiting. Somewhere behind them, 9 American ships are hunting. Oh, man. A man stands on the deck of a ship named after his dead friend. Under his arm is a folded piece of blue cloth, hand-sewn, still smelling faintly of a sailmaker's shop. In a couple hours, this flag will be the only reason people remember this day. The man's name is Oliver Hazard Perry. He's 27 years old. And by sunset, he will either win the largest naval battle fought on American waters, or he'll be dead in it. Okay, first let's back up. To understand what happened on Lake Erie, you have to go back 3 months to a harbor 600 miles away, and to a man who never set foot on Lake Erie at all. His name was James Lawrence, captain of the USS Chesapeake. And on June 1st, 1813, he made a decision that would get him killed. That sucks. The British frigate HMS Shannon was sitting outside Boston Harbor, daring the Americans to come out and fight. Just baiting them. Lawrence's crew was green, barely trained, weeks into their enlistment. His officers begged him to wait. He didn't wait. Ugh. The two ships closed within pistol range and opened fire almost simultaneously. It was over in minutes. The British, they boarded and they swarmed the Chesapeake's deck. Lawrence went down early, hit by musket fire, blood soaking through his uniform as his men tried to carry him below. He refused to stay quiet. As his sailors dragged him down the ladder, he kept shouting back at them. Over the cannon smoke, over the screaming, the same 6 words over and over again. I'm getting goosebumps. Don't give up the ship. Don't give up the ship. The Chesapeake was captured anyway. Lawrence died 4 days later at sea as a prisoner's flag lying over the ship he had just commanded. He was 31. Here's the part that matters the most for our story. Oliver Hazard Perry and James Lawrence, they were super tight. They were great friends, real friends. They served together, trained together, written each other letters. That's like texting now, I guess. When word of Lawrence's death reached Perry on the shores of Lake Erie, he didn't just mourn him. He had a flag made. It was 9 by 5 feet, dark blue with Lawrence's dying words stitched across in white cloth letters, 2 feet tall. Don't give up the ship. He named his own flagship the USS Lawrence in his friend's honor. And he folded that flag and kept it below deck, waiting for the day he'd need it. This is awesome. But he didn't know that day was coming. In just 3 months, it would happen. Here's what almost nobody knows about the Battle of Lake Erie. The American fleet that fought it didn't exist 5 months earlier. Lake Erie in early 1813 was British water. The Royal Navy controlled it, which meant Britain could move troops and supplies anywhere along the shore. And the young United States couldn't do a damn thing about it. If America wanted the lake, America would have to build a navy from nothing. In a wilderness shipyard, in the middle of a war, with the enemy close enough to watch them do it, the place was Presque Isle. Beautiful in the summer, by the way, on the Pennsylvania shore. Perry arrived there in the spring of 1813 to find exactly what you'd expect. Mud, mosquitoes, half-trained shipwrights, and almost no supplies. Cannon, rope, sailcloth, all of it had to be hauled overland from Pittsburgh, like 100 miles away, on wagons and pack horses, because the British controlled the water route. Perry built 2 brigs, the Lawrence and the Niagara. The Niagara's still around to this day in some capacity. And 7 smaller vessels, essentially from raw lumber cut on the spot. Green wood, unseasoned. Ships built so fast the timber haven't even finished drying before they hit the water. And then the fleet was nearly finished. It almost didn't matter because Presque Isle Harbor had a sandbar at its mouth, and Perry's 2 biggest ships drew too much water to cross it. For days, his half-built navy sat trapped in its own harbor while a British squadron patrolled just offshore, close enough to end the whole effort with a single attack. Luckily, they never came. Nobody's fully sure why. Bad weather, bad luck, bad intelligence. But it gave Perry just enough time to strip his ships down, float them over the bar on makeshift pontoons, and get his fleet onto open water. By August, Perry had 9 ships. Now he needed men. He got them from wherever he could. Soldiers pulled from land units who'd never crewed a ship, and a substantial number of free black sailors, experienced seamen who made up close to a quarter of his crews and whom Perry later would credit by the name of their courage under fire. It was not a polished elite fighting force by any means. It was a scrap-together crew on green ships, and it was about to face a professional Royal Navy squadron under a battle-hardened commander. Oh, man. That commander's name was Robert Harriet Barclay, a one-armed Royal Navy veteran who'd lost his limb fighting Napoleon at Trafalgar. Damn. He was not a man Perry could afford to underestimate. Both sides knew what was coming, but neither side knew exactly when. September 10th, 1813. Dawn. Perry's lookout spotted the British squadron first. 6 ships, sails on the horizon, moving in from the northwest. Perry gave the order almost immediately. Get underway, form a line, prepare for battle. Dude just gets after it, man. But there was a problem. The wind was wrong. For hours, both fleets crept toward each other at a crawl, sails barely catching air. Guns loaded and crews standing at their stations with nothing to do but wait. Waiting is its own kind of horror. No cannon fire yet, no smoke, no screaming, just 2 lines of wooden ships drifting slowly closer across flat water. Every man aboard knowing exactly what was coming and exactly how long he still had before it arrived. Then, around 11 in the morning, the wind shifted. It swung around to the southwest, directly in Perry's favor. He could close the distance on his own terms now. There was no more waiting to be done. Perry climbed to his own quarterdeck and had his men run up the blue flag, Lawrence's flag, 9 feet of hand-sewn canvas, unfurling in the wind for the first time in front of the whole fleet. He turned to his crew and asked them one question. My brave lads, this flag contains the last words of Captain Lawrence. Shall I hoist it? The men roared back, yes, and it went up. Dude, those dudes were probably so jacked right then. Don't give up the ship, in 2-foot letters snapping over the deck of the Lawrence as the ship turned towards the British line. There was no more time left for speeches. The 2 fleets were closing in fast now, guns out, gunner standing over a loaded cannon with a slow match burning. Somewhere across the water, on the deck of a British ship called the Detroit, a lookout was watching the American line come on and doing the same math every man on both fleets were doing. Someone was about to fire the first shot of the largest naval battle in American history. At 1:45 p.m, the British flagship Detroit opened fire, a long gun at extreme range, testing the distance. The first shot missed. The second one, it did not. It tore through the Lawrence's deck, and the Battle of Lake Erie had officially begun. Here's where the plan started to fall apart. Perry's strategy called for his whole line to close together and support each other. The Lawrence, the Niagara, and the smaller gunboats all closing in unison, spreading the British fire across multiple targets. But the wind was light and shifting, and the Niagara, commanded by a young lieutenant named Jesse Elliott, he fell behind. Whether by wind, by miscommunication, or by hesitation is something historians still argue about 2 centuries later. What's certain is this: Lawrence surged ahead of the rest of the fleet, and for almost 2 brutal hours, Perry's flagship fought almost the entire British squadron alone. 2 ships, sometimes 3, concentrated their broadside on a single American brig. The Lawrence's crew fired back until their guns were disabled one by one, smashed off their carriages by British iron. Rigging fell in tangled sheets. The main mast was hit and hit again. Men worked their guns in the open with no cover as round after round tore through the hull. By the time it was over, the Lawrence had lost 80% of the men who started the fight standing at their rails. Perry himself walked through the deck, moving from gun to gun, and at one point helped haul a cannon into position himself, where there weren't enough uninjured men left to do it. Listen, we won't dwell on what 2 hours of point-blank cannon fire does to a wooden ship packed with men. It's enough to say the deck of the Lawrence became a place no one who survived it fully described it in full. And that by early afternoon, the ship could no longer fight. Every usable gun was gone. Perry was, for all practical purposes, standing on a wreck. And the blue flag, Lawrence's flag, his best friend, was still flying over it. This was the moment, and the flag goes down with the ship, and the battle is likely lost. Right? Or do something almost no other commander in naval history had tried in the middle of active engagement. Perry obviously tried the second one. Perry ordered the flag lowered from the ruined Lawrence. Not surrendered, moved. He had it folded under his arm, climbed down into a small open rowboat with 4 sailors, and gave the order to row. Half a mile of open water separated the Lawrence from the still fighting Niagara. Half a mile. In a rowboat. In full view of the entire British squadron. This dude, he was under active cannon and musket fire the whole way. I mean, this dude, his officers begged him not to. He went anyway. Cannonballs threw up columns of water around the little boat. At one point, according to accounts from men who were there, Perry stood up in the boat to better see the fighting and had to be pulled back down by his own crew before a shot took his head off. Yikes. He kept the flag against the chest the entire way. It took roughly 15 minutes. It must have felt way longer. He reached the Niagara, climbed aboard, and immediately took command from Elliott. The Lawrence's blue flag went up the Niagara's mast within minutes. Do not give up the ship. Flying again. This time over a ship that could still fight. Behind him, the Lawrence struck her colors. She had to. There was nothing left to fight with. And continuing would have meant slaughtering the wounded men still aboard her for no purpose at all. For a few minutes, the battle looked lost. The Americans' leadership had just surrendered in front of the whole fleet, but Perry wasn't finished. He turned the fresh, nearly untouched Niagara, sails full, guns loaded, crew ready, directly into the heart of the damaged British line. The British squadron had spent 2 hours pounding the Lawrence into a wreck. Their own ships had taken damage doing it, rigging cut up, guns crew thin, and their commander, Barclay, badly wounded. His own one good arm now injured as well. Phew, terrible luck. Forced below deck and out of the fight entirely. Into that exhausted, damaged line sailed a fresh ship with a full broadside and a furious captain. Perry drove the Niagara directly through the gap between the British Detroit and the Queen Charlotte, firing both broadsides simultaneously as he passed, raking both ships from bow to stern at close range. A devastating tactical maneuver that most captains only get to attempt once in a career, if ever. The British ships, already battered and now missing their commander, tried to turn and come together, fouling each other's rigging in the chaos. For several critical minutes, 2 of Britain's largest warships on the lake were tangled together, unable to maneuver, unable to properly return fire, essentially sitting targets in the middle of their own line. The rest of the American fleet, finally closing the gap Perry's earlier fight had bought them, poured in behind the Niagara. What had been a desperate, nearly lost battle became, within the span of about 15 minutes, an absolute rout. One by one, the British ships struck their colors, Detroit and the Queen Charlotte. Then the smaller vessels, seeing no way out, followed. By 3 in the afternoon, less than 4 hours after the first shot, every ship in the British squadron had surrendered. It was, and remains, the only time in the history of the Royal Navy that an entire British squadron surrendered in a single battle. Jeez, and they've run like 1,000,000 battles. It's crazy. That evening, sitting on the deck of the Niagara, surrounded by wreckage and the dead of both fleets, Perry wrote 2 messages. The first went to General William Henry Harrison, commanding American land forces nearby, and it became one of the most quoted lines in American military history. Quote, "We have met the enemy, and they are ours. 2 ships, 2 brigs, 1 schooner, and 1 sloop." End quote. The second was shorter, written to the Secretary of the Navy, reporting the day's cost as plainly as a man in shock is able to. Quote, It has pleased the Almighty to give to the arms of the United States a single victory. End quote. The numbers behind those sentences were brutal. Roughly 24 American dead, close to 100 wounded, the vast majority of them from the Lawrence alone. British losses were comparable, spread across a squadron that no longer belonged to Britain. The wounded of both sides were treated together in the same cramped spaces by the same overwhelmed surgeons. Enemies an hour earlier now lying side by side because there simply wasn't room to separate them. The Battle of Lake Erie didn't just win a lake. It broke Britain's supply lines to its Native American allies and its own troops across the entire northwest frontier. Within weeks, British and Allied forces under Tecumseh were forced to abandon Detroit and retreat into Upper Canada, a retreat that ended a few weeks later at the Battle of the Thames, where Tecumseh himself was killed and the British Allied Confederacy in the region collapsed for good. None of it happens without what took place on Lake Erie that afternoon, and arguably, none of that happens without a folding blue flag and a 15-minute rowboat ride through cannon fire. Jeez, hell yeah. The flag survived the battle. It's preserved today at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis. And Lawrence's dying words became the Academy's official motto, carried forward for over 2 centuries by officers who, in most cases, have no idea a friend's grief is the reasons those words exist at all. James Lawrence lost his ship. He lost his life making a promise his crew couldn't keep. But 3 months later, on a lake he never saw, his best friend kept it for him. He carried across open water, under fire, and turned 6 dying words into the reason a country still remembers his name. Whew, what a story. That's crazy. Hey, please subscribe, hit that like button, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Thank you so much.